Hey everyone, this is Innovator's Mindset with Catlin Tucker. What's going on? I am so excited to have Catlin on the podcast without Katie Novak today. This is the first
I know.
time you've been on the podcast without Katie Novak.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I am like really excited because Catlin actually has a new book coming out with Impress. It is called The Station Rotation Model and UDL, Elevate Tier 1 Instruction and Cultivate Learner Agency. And Cat, I don't know how you write so many books. Like it is, how are you doing this? Like how are you writing so many books? I think we're going to get into the book, but like why is this process? And if you know anything about Catlin, she is such a brilliant mind in education. She speaks all. Why are you laughing? Don't be laughing at this.
Oh,
I'm that. This is why people don't give you compliments, Calvin. Right there.
I
If you
know. I'm
laugh
not
at
good at
them,
taking
right?
them.
You do speak all over the world. You are an expert in so many different areas, and so I feel really blessed. Let's talk about the writing process. How are you getting? Because it's not that you're just putting out books. You're putting out books with so many interesting ideas, so many unique ideas, and overwhelmingly, teachers say that there's such practical strategies that really benefit in the classroom. Like, how do you even go through this process? How do you like figure this stuff out?
I think for me, writing is a really critical part of how I learn. So I'm constantly ingesting podcasts and, research studies, whether it's, just for my own interest and edification, or it's because I'm working with graduate students and I'm digging into a topic. And so I write every single day, whether it's drafting part of a blog, whether it's working on a book. And for me, it's just a great way to keep learning and also make sense of what I'm learning, like contextualize it. And I think to your point, the thing I feel like I probably do really well, if I had to say, like, hey, this is a strength of mine, is taking ideas that just feel kind of complex or maybe a little abstract and like pinning them down into specific strategies and resources for teachers, which I think, that's why people respond to my blogs and my books, is it's like, oh, I love this idea, but now Catlin's showing me how to actually put it into practice.
So I got this question for you. I know you do tons of workshops and
Mhm.
people actually like get your books, do workshops, you'll do your workshops, get your books. What comes first, right? Like do you actually like do the practices and then write about them, or do you like write about them and then do the practice? Because it's like I totally agree with
Oh,
you.
I see.
A lot of my learning has come out of just kind of reflecting, and especially when you put out stuff as much as you do publicly, you're always like thinking
Mhm.
like like what's the challenge on this, right? You have to think about different perspectives. So like do you do this work with people and then write about it, or do you like write about it and then like I know that if you write about it, either way you're always modifying and changing things, but what's that process for you? Because I know you do tons of work with schools and districts with like keynotes, workshops on the stuff that you talk about.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm always in it first myself, whether that was when I was a teacher. And like, I remember my very early blogs, I'd get very excited because you would share them where I'd try something in my classroom and it often did not go perfectly, right? And then I would be kind of making adjustments and writing about it in my blog to be like, okay, this is what I did. This is what worked. This is the resource I created. And so now, even when I am coaching teachers, we're trying these things in classrooms. And, when you're in a classroom with a teacher coaching, it's their classroom culture. They're different from me. Like, I never really wrestled with classroom management. And as a result, I didn't hit some of the bumps implementing some of these strategies that other teachers might. But as a coach, I see different bumps and barriers. And so I think my writing is a lot richer because now I'm seeing what a whole host of people are struggling with when they go to implement something like station rotation or a student led learning strategy. And now when I write, I can address those challenges. I can help teachers troubleshoot. I can create resources to guide them through the process so hopefully it goes more smoothly. So it's kind of like I don't know, like a concert of things influencing my writing, but definitely like a very pivotal way of how I document what I'm doing that's working and how I'm supporting other people and what's been helpful for them as well.
It's like chicken or egg. You don't know. It's
Yeah.
like could be either one. And by the way, you said about excited that I share your stuff. I would share your stuff and I would be like, "You're so smart." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm so smart sharing Catlin stuff." I share it all the time. And by the way, anyone, if you do not check out Catlin's website, her blog, her email list, it has so many great resources that comes out all the time. So I will actually link that down below. Now, there's 2 points in the book we've talked a lot about UDL with our good
Mhm.
friend Katie Novak, which I don't really like that you two have become better friends than whatever, but whatever.
I
We
love
don't want to get
her.
into it. Yeah, I know you two. You two are I'm very proud that I introduced you to, but I'm very upset that I've like been pushed aside. But whatever. So let's talk about the station rotation model. Like, if someone who's never
Okay.
heard of that term before, has never heard of that concept, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So first, I have to say, I can't believe it took me this long to write a book specifically on this model. It is the most popular blended learning model
Can I
that,
just interrupt you for a second? I
yeah.
too cannot believe you have taken this long to write this, because you are like so known for this stuff. Just
I
so,
know.
just I agree with you. I
I
100%
just
agree with you.
always thought people would just be excited
Oh,
about blended learning, and this is one model. But honestly, there's a lot of people who I don't even think they associate station rotation with blended learning. They're just like station rotation. It's this great strategy, instructional strategy. So it does exactly what the name suggests. There are a series of stations or learning activities that students rotate through. And there are three types of stations. So there's that teacher led station, an online station, an offline station. The total number of stations might vary depending on the teacher, the class length, how many kids are in a class, but those are the types that you have in a rotation. And so in this book, I'm really drilling down into, okay, if we're using the station rotation model, why is that? And the biggest benefit is definitely that at that teacher led station, the educator has time with small groups to differentiate direct instruction, differentiate modeling, give formative feedback and guidance as students are working. But then at the other stations, students have more opportunities to control the pace at which they move through those learning activities, and hopefully some control over the path. So giving them meaningful choices that are embedded into the learning activities as well. So that's kind of the high level benefit of station rotation. And for those districts that have spent just like a wild amount of money on devices and Wi-Fi
yeah,
infrastructure but aren't seeing academic improvements or gains as a result of that investment, like I can't tell you how many teachers I talk to who are like, oh, technology is just a huge
right,
distraction. Like, I wish we could take it out of classrooms. And I'm like, no,
right.
we're just not helping educators design with the technology effectively. And so that's another component of this.
Yeah, that, it's actually, there's a lot of research that says, if you add technology into an environment, it doesn't actually impact academic outcomes or, student
Mhm.
learning. There's that. And I actually agree with that. I think you would agree with that too. Because if you just do what you've always done, but then add a device in the environment, yeah, it's like if you just added TV when I was a kid, I'm going to watch TV, right?
Right.
It's actually, how does learning change when you have access to these things, right? So if you're doing learning as the way you've always done it, and then add a device, it's going to, if anything, it's probably going to cause issues than anything. But it's really, what do you actually, implement? How do you think differently about teaching and learning in the classroom? I think that's a really important aspect. So one of the things I asked you before is, like, what's something that you really want to kind of talk about? And you actually said about elevating tier one instruction. Now, this is something that I think we take for granted in education. This is like, tier one is kind of acronymy in some ways, that it's like people
Yeah.
just say, oh, tier one. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, so not everyone's
Mhm.
UDL, not everyone's focused on this. So like, when you talk about like tier one, the tiers, when you're talking about this, first of all, like, can you define that and explain what that looks like in a school? And then why is your focus on elevating that practice?
Okay. Such a good question. So
I
when
only
we
ask
talk
good
about
questions. I only ask good questions.
when we talk about tier one instruction, it's important to kind of first talk about multi-tiered systems of support, right? So tier one is what we talk about when we talk about multi-tiered systems of support when it comes to instruction. And that's really what I'm focusing on, because there's a whole behavior component as well.
Yeah.
But tier one instruction is often referred to as core or universal. So this is the instruction that all students should be receiving. And part of the challenge, I think, is that when we call something core or universal, in a lot of educators' minds, it's like, oh, well, then that's whole group because everybody needs it, right? So that's tier one. Then we have tier two, and that's the next layer. So if tier one wasn't effective for students because it was either too rigorous and challenging or not rigorous and challenging enough, then we have tier two support or enrichment, right? So we have kids who might need additional support. They didn't quite they didn't quite get tier one. They're going to need a little more from the educator to really get the information, master a skill, or they might need to go a little further because the tier one wasn't enough to really
Right.
continually to push them. Then we have tier three, that's intervention for more significant academic kind of gaps and holes that need to be addressed. And in a lot of schools, when kids need tier three, they're pulled out of a classroom for that. And so I don't spend a ton of time in the book talking about tier two and tier three. I do address the fact that if we start to design
Mhm.
with the station rotation, creating opportunities for educators to meet the needs of small groups of learners, the focus in the book is tier one, but I do also address how that could be leveraged for tier two and tier three as well to keep those kids in the classroom. But for me, when I talk about hey, let's elevate tier one instruction, I want educators to start getting more intentional about what are they presenting in whole group versus what are they presenting in small group, right? If they're going to present a concept and skill that is complex, it is nuanced, kids have classically struggled with it, or the pre-assessment or formative assessment data shows me kids are in wildly different places in relation to this concept or skill, why on earth would I introduce that whole group, right?
Mhm.
Instead, I'm going to use the data to kind of inform my grouping, and I am going to differentiate right out of the gate for small groups. So hopefully, tier one instruction is as effective as possible. Kids are getting the instruction at a level that works for them with the scaffolds they need to make sense of it so that there's less need for that tier two, tier three support and intervention.
This is like everyone, if you're like listening right now, this is you're so smart. It's like scared me. The stuff you know is just absolutely unbelievable. I think probably, kind of going back to an earlier conversation,
Mhm.
there's no way you know all this stuff if you don't write about it as much as you do, right?
Yes,
Like, it's actually
exactly.
amazing, like, how much you know about this stuff and like how deep you can go into it. Okay, there's two groups I want you to address right now, okay?
Right.
So the first group is I know what station rotation is. Why would I get this? Like I already do this. So why would this book benefit them?
Yeah, well, there's no other book on the station rotation
Uh,
that I'm aware of, which is exciting. And I think okay, so first there are teachers who are like, quote unquote, I do station rotation. And
Mhm.
actually, what they do is more like learning centers
Sure.
where students are going through the exact same activities. Sometimes the teacher's not even leading a station. And so the benefit of this book is one, it is grounded in a data driven design cycle. So educators who are like, yeah, I use station rotation, but like I'm not really, grouping kids flexibly. I'm not consistently using data. I'm not really differentiating all the time. Now the book is going to guide an educator through the steps of collecting and using data strategically in ways that I think will be accessible and not super overwhelming. I go through and share 5 different instructional strategies that teachers can use at their teacher led station to differentiate for skill level groupings and mixed skill level groupings. Because that's another part of this conversation that I think is so important, which is I don't want station rotation to be used to always put kids in skill level groups. Like, I worry what that does for the students who are in the lower level group all the time, right? To their confidence, to their belief in their ability as a learner. So, the reason I introduce specific structures for that teacher led is we should be able to differentiate effectively for mixed skill level groups. But if we don't have a clear instructional structure at that teacher led station, it's really hard to do. Then at the online station, I really dig into how educators can move from using technology to simply isolate learners, which happens all the time, right? Watch this video, put on your headphones, play this, education game. And how do we actually start to use technology to connect learners, to really target those kind of 4 C's of 21st century learning? And then also for teachers who are like, oh, I don't really give students choices in the station rotation, we talk a lot about how do we make student agency and meaningful choice sustainable. So it's removing barriers for learners. So in addition to like all of that, there's also kind of at the end, like if you've been doing station rotation, but there's like opportunities to refine, develop your practice, kind of really embrace those pillars of high quality design with data informed differentiation, student agency. There's also these kind of fun modifications that educators can play with that take station rotation to kind of a different place. So I think sometimes educators are like, oh, I'm kind of doing this, but I could do it
Right.
better. And they don't even realize there's all these other fun variations of the station rotation model.
Okay, so I've never heard of station rotation. I don't know what it
Okay.
is. Why would I get the book? Like, how does it help me? Does it help the beginner, the someone who's never heard of this before?
Yes, yes. I think if you're a teacher and you're feeling like, one, what you're doing right now isn't working for you and it's not working for a lot of your kids. Maybe you have a lot of diversity of skills, learning preferences, you have multilingual students, and you're like, gosh, I feel like I'm not able to effectively teach and reach my students with the instructional approach I have, which for most educators is full group teacher led, teacher paced, right? Then this is a really fabulous model to like add to your teaching tool belt. So when you are working with students on a complex concept or skill, or the data is showing you they have really different needs and really different places, now you have an instructional strategy you can lean on to work with small groups and meet them where they're at. And I will tell you, I spent 16 years in a high school classroom in a public school, and it was like year 6 or 7 when I started using station rotation. And it was just this moment of like, oh my gosh, I don't have to see if kids can come in at break or after school or during lunch to get their needs met. Like I can do this in the classroom. And you can even pull really time consuming things like feedback into the classroom using this model. So yeah, for any teacher who's feeling like a little dissatisfied with the way things are working in their classrooms, this is a great
Right.
model. And it's not an elementary model, which I think I have a whole dispelling myths kind of section in one of the
Huh.
chapters. Because I'm like, just because educators in elementary school rotate kids through learning stations doesn't mean this is an elementary model.
Right.
If you have a need for differentiation, this is a model that can be wildly beneficial for you and your students.
And one of I think the biggest takeaway from me, what you just said, is that hey, like we are overwhelmed with time, and this could actually make better use of the time that you have that you're not spending extra after the class. And I don't, you mentioned earlier, some of the effective practice you had, how it really helped you with classroom management. I don't think any practice will on its own solve every issue with behaviors or anything like this, but I do think
Right.
it can actually make a positive impact, right? Like it can make a positive impact. I know when I was struggling as a student or as bored, that's when you got the
Oh,
worst
yeah.
of George, right? Like that was that was it too, right? So I think
Most
it's a
kids.
pretty active approach. So the thing that I really appreciate about you, which is why I've always loved your work, you will take very complex ideas, make them accessible to like every teacher out there. So I know this book is going to be a huge hit. So I'm really pumped to get it out there. You can get the station rotation model and UDL, Elevate Tier 1 Instruction, and Cultivate Learner Agency. It was down in the link below. It is now available. And also, if you want, we got a zillion other Catlin and Katie Novak. This is your first Impress solo
On
book.
my own. I
Yeah.
know. I'm
Yeah.
so excited.
It's good. This is like good. We don't have to have Katie here anymore. Chaperone. Anything like
No,
that.
stop it.
Yeah, so
Katie and I will definitely be back.
I'm so honored that that you published this with us because I know it's going to be a huge hit. I know that everyone that's listened to this is going to love it. So, Cal, thanks for your time and thanks for writing this book. I know I cannot wait to get it out to the world.
Well, thank you for having me and thank you for supporting all this writing I'm doing.
Yeah, and make sure you check out Catlin's stuff down in the links below. So, thanks to everyone for being here. Have a wonderful day.